For the title of this video, that's not very fast. It's a bit disappointing. Oh well. Anyways, this joke's come to an end. How we doing, everybody? It's your Mosasaur Prince of Steel Tethysaurus Yorkshire, and today I thought I'd do a video on a sort of underrated Mosasaur, a Mosasaur that needs a bit more love, what I call the Whippet of the Seas, Clidastes. That's right, I'm a poet, I didn't even know it. Anyways, enough about how I can rival Eminem on the charts, let's get into Clidastes. So, Clidastes is a mosasaurian mosasaur that dates from around possibly as early as the Turonian, around 90 million years ago, to about 70 million years ago during the Campanian. And this, i.e., like all other mosasaurs, means it's late Cretaceous. But unlike some of the more famous mosasaurs, like Mosasaurus and Tylosaurus, Clidastes was built differently. So, instead of being quite large and bulky, this animal had a slender body and probably only reached a max of about 6 meters long, about as large as a saltwater crocodile. Now, this seemed up with a rocket up his butt, which explains why he was so fast. Well, not really, but we'll get into that. He actually possessed a slender skull and slender teeth, which means, unlike those foresaid, mosasaurs like Mosasaurus, Tylosaurus, this guy was going after smaller prey, and a lot easier prey. So, majority of the time, Clidastes was probably going after small cephalopods, soft-bodied cephalopods, and soft-bodied fish. So, nothing under the size of, like, an archelon turtle, or a Xiphactinus, or other mosasaurs. Well, maybe, I don't know. Now, the name Clidastes actually refers to the interlocking processes on Clidastes vertebrae. These forward projecting processes would have interlocked with the vertebrae in front and therefore made the spinal column of Clidastes quite rigid, which meant that when this animal was swimming fast, it was Whew, he's gone away. He's gone away. Well, he's still there, but he's gone away. Yeah, Clidastes was fast, like our favourite Disney character, Lightning McQueen. He was chow. Some of these jokes are just not that funny. Let's get back to the Clidastes. Now, to say that Clidastes' taxonomy is complicated, well, every mosasaur's taxonomy is complicated, so there's no point in me reiterating that. Now, at the moment, there are two species of Clidastes. There's the type species, Clidastes propython, and the similarly built Clidastes iguanavus. So, at the moment, Clidastes propython seems to have ranged from possibly the Turonian up to maybe the Campanian, but a lot of those earlier and later fragmentary remains are a bit meh. So, more of a Santonian to Campanian range is accepted for the species. Now, its sort of sister species, if you like, Clidastes iguanavus, differentiates from propython in certain shapes of the vertebrae, so this meant that probably propython or iguanavus would have had different swimming styles and therefore different hunting styles. And C. iguanavus seems to only range in the Campanian, so maybe it is a descendant of propython, but the material and the nature of Clidastes' taxonomy, it really does complicate a lot of this stuff. Now, up until 2018, there were two other species of Clidastes that were heavily considered within the genus. First up was Clidastes lyodontus, which was differentiated from other Clidastes species based on certain aspects of the premaxilla, the dentaries, the maxilla, and of course, the teeth. And the other, now relegated, invalid species of Clidastes, Clidastes moravilensis, differentiated based on teeth. Okay. And there were other fragmentary remains of Clidastes in Europe. But right now, based on 2018 and 2019 papers, Clidastes is restricted to the Western Interior Seaway, so it is an American mosasaur. And those two former species of Clidastes, moravilensis and lyodontus, they have been relegated as Numidubium and Numinumen, because one has been destroyed and two is probably just propython or something else, we're not entirely sure. But what's a little less confusing is that Clidastes seems to be a close relative of a recently named mosasaur, Jormungandr valhalliensis. And along with Jormungandr, it seems that Clidastes may be closely related to Mosasaurus. It may even be that Clidastes was the start of a lineage that led up to Mosasaurus, but there needs to be a lot more work done to really solidify this idea. So, when Clidastes was first discovered and described back in 1869 by Edward Drinker Cope, the bone wars. We'll not talk about the bone wars. We'll talk about the mosasaurs, though. There were two other mosasaurs that were actually discovered around the same time, which I like to call the big American three. You had Clidastes, you had Tylosaurus, and you had Platycarpus. And these were, ironically, very successful mosasaurs when mosasaurs started first taking over the oceans. So from the Cnidastes to the Campanian, we had an emergence of Clidastes, Tylosaurus, and Platycarpus, and these three particular genera dominated the oceans, particularly in the western interior seaway. So not only were they the big three American mosasaur fossils, they were the big three defining mosasaurs from the Cnidastes to the Campanian. And then Mosasaurus came along and ruined it. Yeah. But during the time that Clidastes lived alongside these two other mosasaurs, its only big competition was the smaller of the two, Platycarpus. Now, both animals seem to have attained a size of around about 4 to 6 meters in length. They were both small mosasaurs, and they primarily ate fish. Now, Clidastes and Platycarpus seem to differentiate from each other primarily in the structure of their skulls and the structure of their vertebrae, with Clidastes having a stiffer vertebrae and Platycarpus having a more flexible vertebrae. So this hunting styles is probably what kept them apart. So maybe they fed on the same stuff, but how they hunted it would have kept them apart. So there was probably a lack of competition, even though they were feeding on very similar stuff. And then they both had to be really scared of Tylosaurus, because Tylosaurus was like twice the size, and we found Platycarpus and Clidastes remains in the stomach of Tylosaurus. Scary stuff. But Clidastes did pretty well during this time, and in fact we have evidence that Clidastes from all ages did pretty well. Oh, look at him. Absolutely adorable. He's got my eyes. And my chin. And maybe my hair. I can explain. So what I can actually explain is that a 2015 study actually looked at neonatal remains, basically baby remains, of Clidastes. And what they found is that these Clidastes babies were actually living in the same place at the same time as mum and dad. And this actually changed a lot of perspective on mosasaur ontogeny and how the juveniles differentiated from the adults in terms of behaviour. It seems like that the babies actually did spend a lot of time with the adults in the same environments. However, because of obviously, baby be small, adult be big, the babies were probably feeding on other prey items, and this kept them apart from the adults. But, maybe the occasional baby got snacked up by a mum and dad, It happens to me sometimes. I can explain. But it's possible that baby Clidastes were probably not as manoeuvrable as their mums and dads, so therefore they spent a lot of time with mum and dad or in the same areas, and therefore mum and dad might have come in every so often to defend their kids if a big predator was coming in and like, Clidastes. I could really go for some Clidastes right now. But without direct evidence of showing parental care in mosasaurs like this, it's just all speculation at the moment. But it is interesting to see that babies did spend a lot of time in the same environments as the adult. Anyways, I thought I'd just give a little video on Clidastes, which I feel is a very underrated mosasaur. It's a very unique mosasaur, and it's one of the sort of pivotal pillars of mosasaur research, particularly back in the 1800s, and now it's sort of like a big mosasaur name, if you like, and not a lot of people give it the credit it deserves. But I tried. Anyways, guys, hope you had a good day. This is your Mosasaur Prince of Steel out. Ta-da. Bye.